This is a video that I have been asked to make many times, and I put it off for a long time, put it off for many years, and I think um, it's a hard thing to talk about, but I think that it is a good thing to talk about, um, especially in light of recent stories that have come out with healthcare and violence toward nurses. Um, so, without further ado, I'm gonna try to just do this all in one sitting and make it as short um, and to the point as I can, just to raise awareness and because for several years now, you guys have been watching my shoulder videos, and I think that there's been so many encouraging comments and so many curiosity, and it's always interesting, like, why does somebody need a shoulder surgery? Why does a rotator cuff need to be repaired? What could cause that? And so here's my story. So it was in 2017, and I am trained as a nurse, and so I was working in intensive care unit. I was in ICU nurse, and I was at a small hospital that we wore a lot of hats, and so I was critically trained for emergency department and PACU, and also ICU. And so we would have patients that sometimes would float in that we would watch, different acuities or like levels of sickness or whatever their diagnosis might be. So we were not trained as behavioral health. We were not a psych unit, but we did have a patient come through that was a no sickness, no injury that we could tell, just behavioral disturbances. And so the day that I went, the day that this happened, the patient was more aware than usual, and they had been up out of bed and mostly cooperative. It was not my patient. It was the other nurse on the floor with me, but she was having difficulty getting the patient, redirecting the patient, getting them back to bed, and I was lead RN that day. So I went to help, and she was, I've been watching the telemetry, it's the heart monitors out there in the nurse's station ICU, and so she traded me places so she could, we always had to keep eye on those, and if there's any other call lights that went off. And so I went into the room by myself, but within eye shot, she could see me. And the patient, when I came in, was initially compliant and happy to kind of be redirected. And I, as one does in a lot of nursing situations, you get close enough to the patient to help put them back into bed or to kind of direct them back to bed. And it was something that was very usual for us to do with our duties with the patients that we had. This patient had not beforehand, they'd been with us for a few days, and well, not my patient, no reports of any aggression or violent behavior had been noted. And so it was not something that had been something we were watching for more than usual, and again, this was not behavioral health. This was not like a psychiatric type unit. It's just regular, typically surgical or, illness that was really higher acuity, is how they ended up in our smaller ICU. So I was helping the patient get back into bed, and the patient very quickly on a dime snapped and came at me and attacked me. The patient, I don't remember a lot about everything. I have certain memories that are very strong in my mind, but the other nurse that was in the nurse's station that was watching, she says she looked up and she saw me fly across the room. And so I was thrown across the room, and I hit the wall and fell, and then the patient came and started strangling me, and I do remember that. And the patient was using quite a lot of profanity and making death threats to me, saying that they were going to kill me, and over and over and over again as they strangled me, with the intent to asphyxiate me. And so I struggled, as one does, and I got out of the grasp, the chokehold over my neck, and I was almost to the door to escape the room, and then they came and grabbed a hold of my arm and my hair, and I remember, they wrenched my arm around and they grabbed my hair and pulled out quite a lot of my hair. It was just like hair everywhere. It was my scalp was bleeding, my neck was bruised, and I had eventually I was able to get away. By this time, the other nurse had hit the panic button and had come in to help me, and was able to kind of try to help restrain the patient. And we both got away and barricaded the door, called called all the numbers that you're supposed to call. I think that the thing about that whole story, I work now in a lot of patient safety. I still work as a nurse, and I work looking at patient safety and what causes injury, what causes typically injury to a patient, but injury to anybody. And there had been a feeling that the previous shift had about this patient before we came on shift that day. They just said, we can't put a finger on it. We just feel like there's something different with this patient. And so because of that, we listened. There's nothing like a nurse to know, even if you can't put a finger on it, what's really going on with the patient. And so we listened, and we had asked our security team to stick close. They said, we're not sure what's going on, but please be very close by. So when we call you, you'll come. What ended up happening is that the security individual, it was night shift, and so we just only had one security member on at that point, had decided to walk the perimeter of the grounds. He was outside of the building and outside of phone range, and so he did not hear his phone go off, so disregarded our request. There was no indication, we later found out, for him to go and do those rounds. He just didn't feel the need to stay close when we'd asked him to, and that was really hard to hear that. I just think back about that, and then when the police came, they realized, and this is something that I have difficulty talking about, because I think that a lot of times you're not believed, and people can't imagine that this could have really happened to you. But my attacker was, and this is something I have not told a lot of people except my very close friends and family, but my attacker was a woman, and it is true that she was much bigger than I was, and she's really kind of a large human. But there is this perception that men are the aggressors or men are the attackers, and women, they can't really do that much damage. And so when the police came and the security finally came, the room had been torn apart, the bed was tipped over, the mattress was on the floor, all the blinds in the window had been in the windows that we had, so we could look into the room. They'd all been torn off their holders, the screws. Everything was just, it was quite chaos in the room. And the police, I remember, they said, you were attacked by a woman, and it was so much condemnation in that statement. Like, I can't believe that you can't protect yourself enough to have had this happen to you. It couldn't have been that bad. Like, you must be very, like, I don't even know the right word, but you have to be like somebody that is easily picked on, or like the weakest person. And so 4 police showed up because of the type of call that it was, and it took, the 2 police went in there. They quickly had to call in their other 2 police because they could not restrain the patient. And with the 4 police, they could not restrain the patient. By the time they had the 5th, who was the security guard, they went in, they were able to finally restrain the patient. And they had to, do physical restraints and restrain the patient on all 4 limbs to their gurney and take the patient out that way. The patient was yelling the same life-threatening, "I'm going to kill you," using lots and lots of profanity, and just screaming at the police that she was going to kill them. And they weren't laughing anymore. They at that point they realized how like a superhuman strength that she had in her delusion or whatever it was that she was what she was going through, which we never found out. So I was able to get myself checked out. I went to the emergency room, and they asked me what had happened, and I gave them the summary of what had happened, and I said I just want to get checked out, and I was in absolute shock. And we had taken pictures of the marks on my neck and the hair that had gotten pulled out. Just felt like people were not going to believe me. And the ER provider at the time didn't order any x-rays for me, didn't order me to have a CT scan or an MRI. And just looking at me, didn't lay hands on me. I said, my neck is starting to seize up. It feels not quite right. Said, you're fine, and released me to go back to work. We were short-staffed that night, as is a common occurrence. And so the manager that was there, that we called the house supervisor, they were there when it happened, and they watched my patients while I went to the ER to get checked out. And then when I came back, I was back to work again. And it wasn't until we had a change and a shift change of the house supervisor that the new house supervisor came on shift, and this was many hours later that they told me that I could go home. Didn't tell me anything about taking off. Didn't check up on me. It wasn't until the director called me the next day and said that she heard what had happened and that I could take another day off if I wanted to. And no questions, nothing about following up. It was like, let's not talk about this. Let's just sweep all this under the rug. We don't want to talk about what just happened. Another thing I really remember very clearly is when the police were leaving with the patient, and they took him to the psych hold room in ER, and I never saw them again. I have no idea what happened to the patient. But the police told me, don't bother coming in and filling out a police report because there's nothing we can do. When it's a psych patient, we can't do anything. Our hands are tied. And that made me feel so powerless and like there was nothing I could do. It made me afraid to go in. And if I were to want to go and fill out a police report, I did go in later that week, and I said I need to get my report. Otherwise, there's no record, and this patient could go to another facility, another place, and do this again. Come to find out, we called the patient's next of kin, and had my supervisors did this and found out that the patient's next of kin, their family, had said that in a previous hospital they had been known to also have a violent outburst and had done something similar. But because of the way that our privacy laws are, that didn't track with the patient, and it was a different hospital system, different electronic medical record, and so that violent episode didn't track with her. And so when she came to us, we had no record of knowing that was in her file. And when we did the best we could to find out the information on her, but you just do the best you can when you're in healthcare. And it was very frustrating for me to think that perhaps this patient would go to another healthcare facility after this one and also do something similar. So I tried to do what I could. I thought that maybe we would have some way of having justice by telling the police about it, because she also threatened the police officers, but they said that there was not a lot that even they could do, and that felt frustrating as well. I had human resources call me into their office, and what I felt like was kind of, let's not talk about this. You're fine? Good. This happened. Let's just kind of keep this on the down low. And that made me feel very uncomfortable. So I made an appointment to go talk to the hospital CEO, and I shared my story with the hospital CEO and also the chief executive officer, and also with the chief nursing officer at the hospital. And they both told me very similar things, like, let's just not talk about this. We kind of don't want this story getting out. And it was so confusing for me at the time. I've never felt so alone and not supported. I felt like it was so wrong. I had reached out in the subsequent weeks and months, even to several legal teams throughout my state, and I said, this is kind of the circumstance, and this is kind of how my organization covered it up, and can you help me with this? And they said, no, there's nothing we can do. We don't want to touch it. And so it's been a very interesting thing. But that was in 2017, you know? So all of this time later, I went and got MRIs done and found out that my neck had gotten herniated. It had a disc bulge, and it ended up causing spinal impingement. And so I started having a lot of nerve issues in my arm and kind of down my leg. Had to go see specialists for that, and try to get some steroid injections and take medication. And I was put on light duty at the intensive care unit. So I eventually stopped working at the intensive care unit because so much of what we do is boost patients, lift patients, transport patients. And for me, feeling increasingly weak or increasingly like I didn't have the capability to do that anymore made me feel that I had lost my health, and I had, in essence, lost my job, what I did, what I loved doing, and had lost, in a way, my reputation at the hospital because nobody supported me. I was very alone, and kind of the problem that doesn't go away. I also got an MRI done of my shoulder area, and they found out that my shoulder had been torn. The rotator cuff had been torn, the labrum had also been torn, full thickness and partial thickness tears in both. And so it was a workman's comp claim was opened, and that was a several year process working with workman's comp, and a very frustrating experience because workman's comp is they want to close the claim. It's an insurance company, and so trying to express that you're not ready for them to close the claim yet, it is hard. On top of all of that, I started having nightmares and flashbacks, so I needed to start seeing a therapist for PTSD to treat my PTSD that I was having. I was scared to go out in public, and so I ended up having multiple procedures done to try to fix this. With L&I ended up quitting my job and getting a different type of job that would not be like patient lifting, and I ended up working for a different organization, and so that is what happened to me and how I was not protected. I have thought about maybe a million times what would have happened if I hadn't gone into that room that day. I don't know how a person couldn't think that. But what I will say is that in the 8 years since then, I think about my heart for other caregivers. When I hear stories now about medical staff, I don't care if it's a provider, if it's a nurse, if it's a medical assistant, if it's an X-ray tech, any kind of like a healthcare provider that has something like this happen to them, there is a spot in my heart that got just flung wide open when this happened. Not being believed, not being advocated for, was so deeply damaging to me, and knowing that I did not have anybody when it counted at my place of work that was going to make it right and say, you know what, we really messed up, and we didn't have security when you ask us to have security. We didn't have the right staffing. We shouldn't have sent you a psych patient. We should have had more staff here. It was so many things that was done very wrongly that could have prevented this. And then all of the procedures and therapy and medication and treatment and change of job and so many things after that, I wrestled with that for a very long time. And I came to I really came to the assurance in my mind that I did not want this to be wasted. Um, whatever happened was terrible, and it was wrong. And I'm so thankful that I am alive. I know with assurance that it was the patient's intent to end my life. You know, I as she was sitting there, or well, standing there, you know, with me in a chokehold and punching my head and punching my face and pulling my hair out and trying to just do damage to me. I'm thankful to be alive. I'm thankful that I didn't die. I'm thankful that I was able to have surgeries, that even though I've had a couple of rotator cuff surgeries, the damage that I had was extensive. I've had a lot of therapy done. I feel like I'm in a good place. I still feel the effects of it, but I'm feeling mostly strong. It was a huge incentive for me to advocate for other caregivers. I went back to school, and I thought, I'm going to put myself in a place, maybe administration. Maybe that's what I need to do, because it was administration that let me down. I went and talked with the chief nursing officer and the chief HR officer and the chief executive officer. I talked to my own director in my unit. Everyone let me down, and I don't want to do that for somebody else. So if I could help even one person and be there for them in a position of whatever, management, supervisory, you know, whatever it is, as a leader for them or a point of contact for them, then what happened to me wasn't wasted. And that's what gets me through. That's what makes it, I don't want to say makes it make sense, but that's how I can take what happened and make it so I can turn that into something where good comes out of it. And I know that it's such a cliche phrase, you know, that you make lemonade out of lemons, but really it is true. There's good things that have come out of this. I would not have thought to do this career kind of change if this hadn't have happened. And I don't think that I'm glad that it happened, you know, but I don't want to let that also define my life from here on out. It's now part of me. It's a part of who I am. But other good things have happened because of that. And so that's a confusing thing. It's hard to really grasp and wrap my mind around that. But that's my story. I would love to, I mean, if you got through all of this and listening to all of this, you know, if you've been the victim of something similar, my heart goes out to you. And I don't want to ever assume that I know how you feel. I don't, but I know how I felt when that happened. And so I can imagine how you might feel. And that's rough. I also know that there can be good that can come out of some bad things. And I'm not making a blanket statement over everybody by any means, just sharing my own story and sharing my own journey. And so in even like watching my rotator cuff recovery videos that I've posted, you know, in the last few years, kind of knowing even my heart for that is I'm hoping I can help somebody. I don't want anything that happened to me to be wasted. It's like, if I could just help somebody, and it just won't be in vain, because that is what would kill me. You know, it's like kills my spirit if I think that it was for nothing. So my heart is to be a help. My heart is to be transparent as much as social media can allow. But that's my story. And thank you for watching. Leave a comment if this impacted you, or if there's something that, you know, I can pray for. Be happy to do that. And yeah, hope you have a really good day or evening wherever you are, and that you are healthy. And if you have gone through something like this, I hope you're recovering. Be blessed.